Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority, being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters at Eastleigh. We're being recorded for broadcast on the authority's website, which will be available for repeated viewings. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded, and to the possible use of those images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. Telephones on silent, please, if you haven't already. There's no fire alarm scheduled today. In the event of a fire alarm, out of that door, turn left and follow someone in uniform into the car park. You need your microphone if you're going to talk, and can you remember to turn it off as well, because it saps the power of the other ones. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Katie?
We've received apologies from Councillor Drew, Councillor Harrison and Councillor Lumby.
And Donna Jones. Any more, Zoe?
No, that's all right.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. There aren't any. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting need to be adjusted slightly on account of, in section 174, it boldly says there were no other nominations and Councillor Hughes was unanimously voted as the new Vice Chairman. This is not true. Councillor Huggins. And also, it shows you I read them, you see. And also 180, Members' Developments, the second item, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Huggins, wasn't at that meeting, but Karen Luciani was. Thank you for that. Anything else, people, on the minutes? No? Right. So the minutes okay, I'll sign them when they're done. Deputations, there are no Yep.
I think the minute is correct. The minute is correct at the time that we said who was going. So it's correct. It transpired at the event that Zoe couldn't go and Karen did go. So I think the minute is technically correct, but it's aftermath after it. Changed.
You're being technical again, aren't you? I mean, I would prefer to read it and actually understand who was there. So what are you suggesting?
It's a reflection of the meeting.
That is a true reflection of the meeting.
It's maybe the wording that says had attended, so maybe planned. Yeah, and then we can cover it in members.
All right.
Yes.
Deputations. Chairman's announcements, item 5. Welcome to Dr. Julian Commons, over there at the back, who is the Service Liaison Lead for HMI Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, who is observing today's authority meeting and spending time with officers to gain a greater understanding of the service. You are most welcome. Neil? Next item, culture in the fire and rescue services. Driving improvements in the culture in fire and rescue services is a very important issue, as you know. I attended the Local Government Association conference on the 27th of June with others that explored the issues of our leadership role as Fire and Rescue Authority members in driving improvements in culture. On today's meeting agenda at item 8, we will be hearing a report on the progress and breadth of work being undertaken in relation to the cultural health of the service. Next item, Safety Plan Survey 2023. The service has opened a survey asking people who live or work in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and those who visit the area for their views on risks that concern them most in their local area. The result of the survey will be used to help develop the 2025-2030 Safety Plan, which will set out risks in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and how the service plans on meeting, minimising and mitigating them. The survey results will be added to feedback that has been received from partner organisations, service staff, community focus groups and analysis of data relating to the makeup of our communities and incidents. The draft safety plan will then go to consultation next week. The survey is open now and closes on the 30th of July. And at the last full council meeting in Hampshire, I, during my fire announcements, I did actually announce this to the councillors, and they were notified of the details of the survey, and I'm hoping they have spread it around. Next item, extreme weather. Before this was written, roads hadn't exploded, but I'll read it out anyway. The service has been busy and teams have worked tirelessly during the particular hot and dry conditions that we've been experiencing recently. As temperatures rose, the service experienced a number of calls to incidents for fires in the open and wildfires. This year, for the period of April to June, there have been 11 wildfires, which is similar to the same period last year. In 2022, April-June, there were 10 wildfires, and then 31 in July and 58 in August. Dry and warm conditions increase the chances of fires in the open, spreading out of control. We want to avoid incidents of this kind for the sake of communities, precious nature sites and wildlife. The service has shared simple tips that will help the public stay safe in the countryside and protect it for others to enjoy. On behalf of the authority, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of our operational personnel responding to these fires. These incidents are supported by control staff, incident commanders, incident command units, and duty press, as well as other support teams behind the scenes. And as I said, luckily the jet stream's keeping this horrible weather in Europe away from us at the moment. Where are we with portable barbecues legally?
So the barbecues, so New Forest, for example, they're not allowed to be used in the New Forest, which is really, really welcome. It's always a difficult thing with legislation-wise, and certainly from the National Fire Chiefs Council, not being seen as the kind of fun police, is a phrase we use, but actually it's important that we educate people about the dangers. And there is a very, very strong policy position from the National Fire Chiefs Council, and indeed here, about their use should be very limited, and they should be only held in or only used in designated areas where there's very, very low risk of fires. So places like the New Forest and other rural areas where there's dry grassland, even with the weather we've been having, there's still quite a high risk from wildfires. So it certainly is a growing position around disposable barbecues being outlawed, but at the moment they are perfectly legal, and but should be used with real care, which, as mentioned in your script earlier, Chairman, the fire service gives plenty of advice about to people in our communities.
Okay, thank you. Next item, you will remember that our chief went to Australia a few weeks ago. Interesting on this programme, only one vineyard was down for visiting. But you didn't even do that, did you? Would you like a few words on
Thank you, Chairman.
your story?
And I will bring a full report from the team back to the Fire Authority, and it does link quite nicely with the extreme weather conversation we've just been having. In as much as one of the things we were doing while we were there was working with the Australians, who, as you can imagine, are world-class rural firefighters. The shame of it is one of their key parts of their team went off to Canada whilst we were there, so they were sent out to Canada to assist. But actually, the ongoing and standing arrangement we have with Oregon Fire and Rescue in Northwest America is very akin to the Australians. The Australians actually were doing well before then. So we learned a great deal from them, amongst other things. We were doing also maritime firefighting we're helping them with. We're talking about the AUKUS, the nuclear submarine deal that's been done with America, Britain and Australia, helping them preparing for the licensing arrangements, and a number of other things like high-rise firefighting, maritime response, and the firefighter kit decontamination that they do so well in Australia. So we learned a great deal from them, which I'll bring back in detail to the Fire Authority. They'll all come back buzzing about the stories they've had. All very busy, and had the opportunity of meeting some amazing people, from ministers right down to local leaders in some of the most rural spaces in Australia, seeing how the communities actually create their own resilience and what support or otherwise they need from the state. And sometimes the state intervention, state support is unwelcome, and their desires are somewhat different. So that need for the state to connect with local communities to understand their needs and building that into their plans coincides quite neatly with my role as the Local Resilience Forum Chair for Hampshire and Isle of Wight. So I should bring in that learning back into that space as well to make sure our emergency plans across Hampshire and Isle of Wight, not only for fire but for other things too, really link with what the needs of the communities are, as opposed to what we might think in our offices the communities need. That was a key message I certainly took from Australia, but I say there'll be lots more things we'll bring back with opportunities for us to learn and grow, and that's really the whole reason for our exchange with New South Wales and Southern Australia, which we'll be looking to cement in a further relationship. Thanks, Chairman.
And they're all quite impressed with the kit that the Australians have as well. I'm now getting requests for a helicopter. I'll be speaking to you, Catherine, later. Right, members' developments. Last Monday week, the Chief and I went to the Isle of Wight, where we visited Newport Fire Station. We were going to have a visit with the authorities of the Isle of Wight Council, but that was binned for some reason. We went over to Bembridge to have a look at the current development of the fire station there, and we attended the Sandown Fire Cadets Parade, which is the first Fire Cadets Parade on the island, where the Lord Lieutenant was, which was very good. And then the next day, we visited Ryde. That's the Tuesday fire station, and they all seem to be in good nick. And then we came over here and had a meeting with the new High Sheriff, Amelia Riviera, and two of the loveliest fire dogs you've ever seen in your life, which was really a great treat. I posted it on social media, and it's got more hits than I've ever had anything in my life. It has nothing to do with me, it's the dog. And to that end, we must organise a time when we're all together so we can actually get the fire dogs round. And because if you want good PR, that is brilliant, isn't it, Alex? We can do that. You know, so we'll fix a date where we can get the fire dogs around. Members, and also I've just better alert you, tomorrow there is a Prince's Trust at 2 o'clock on the Isle of Wight at Ryde Fire Station. There is also a Prince's Trust at Basingstoke Fire Station at 6:30 in the evening. On Thursday at 6:30 there's Southampton Prince's Trust as well. I know some of you tell me if you're going to these. So, members, what have we been developing? Karen.
Thank you, Chair. As did you, I went on the 27th of June for the EDI conference, Equality and Diversity Conference, which was really beneficial. I really enjoyed that. Like yourself, I went to the Cadets Passing Out event at Sandown on the Isle of Wight, and it was amazing. It was great, wasn't it, Neil? And I would like to put great emphasis on a young man called Chris Shaw, who's in my ward, a young man who won Cadet of the
Session
for the year. He has some special needs, and he saw the whole course through, and I'm very, very proud of him. Also, I'm organising a council members a visit to Newport Fire Station. I have spoken to Glenn about that today, and some people on the Isle of Wight, because I want for firefighters to understand that we're really interested on the Isle of Wight, and also show off the amazing work. So the 5 million that this committee gave in the budget to get that estate up and to scratch. So I'm really thankful for that. And as for the leaders meeting, I think it was changed online, and I mean, you didn't have any computers, so I'm sorry for that.
Okay, thanks, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. Like yourselves and like Neil and Karen, I was also at Sandown last week. I went over to the island and saw my first passing out parade of the cadets. I was really impressed. I didn't realise how young they were, sort of secondary school age. I expected them to be older. So yeah, really, some very proud parents there on that day, and they put on a little bit of a show for us as well about what they'd learned on their 40 weeks of training. Got a little slide if anybody was interested and wanted to have a look at that. Just a little bit about them in there. So yeah, that was a great first experience. Thanks.
Good, thank you, thank you. Members, anyone else? Roger.
Right, I've been to a number of things since the last meeting. I also attended the LGA cultural meeting in London with Karen and yourself, and I think that was a very good day in explaining out all the different issues that there were with EDI. The big disappointment to me was the very poor, and I would stress poor, attendance from other services. We know it's a major issue. We know that the services have got to be looking at it. But when there's a conference like that put on to actually help members to understand it, I think it was a great disappointment that other services didn't take up the option. When I look at the agenda here, it was originally scheduled for...
You may think of 111 as a service only who require medical support for physical health problems. But across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, 111 also provides a mental health triage service 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That means if you, or someone that you know, is experiencing urgent mental health difficulties, 111 can provide support. We understand it's highly likely that at the time of contacting 111, you will be in an emotional or distressed state. But there are a few essential questions about your physical health we must ask first, to determine what level of urgent care is required. Even if these questions do not seem relevant, they're there for a good reason, as we must first understand if you are in a potentially life-threatening situation. Once you've answered these questions, your needs will be assessed and a member of our mental health triage service team will call you back as soon as possible. If you're already receiving mental health support, we'll review your medical notes to ensure continuity of care. Our mental health nurses use their skills and experience to provide practical help and assistance over the phone. We can also put you in touch with other services that can help in different ways depending on your need. You can call us back at any time. 111 is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, offering support when other mental health services may not be available. Mental illness does not discriminate, and neither do we. Our service is available to all, day or night. In a crisis, our NHS 111 mental health triage service is here for you.
ERG meeting, which is a meeting with the inspectorate, and again it came up there about inspections, and I raised the point, as Neil will know, is that why don't we say to people coming in from outside, if you come in and you're trained, to have an agreement that if they leave within a certain period of time, they then have to pay part of the contribution of the costs which we have paid for to train them from the public purse. In another organisation I'm connected with, we do that, and but it didn't go down very well with the chiefs, I don't think. I don't know why, but the other thing I would say about that ERG meeting is that Neil was extremely good there in the questions that he asked to make sure the inspectorate knew the issues which the fire services were actually experiencing. So they didn't come in cold, they knew what the issues and the problems were, so that was very good. What else? And I've also attended the Fire Service Management Committee in London as well. In my capacity on that, there was, again, the one of the main issues there was the spending review and looking forward to what the NFCCC with the RGA are going to put forward to the government for finance for next year, and the expectations of hopefully trying to get a multi-period settlement, but I think that's probably unlikely. And one of the other things is to go for the £5 option or 3%, which was in this year's settlement. So again, trying to get that put through. Well, that's obviously all going to be down to the government, and hopefully we will get a good settlement this year. The other thing is that what they were asking is that the authorities also write, when the actual final bid is put into government, that the different authorities also write and support what is being said in their bid, so that we hopefully can get enough pressure on government to get what we want. So that's a resume of where I've been and what I've done.
Roger, thank you. Zoe?
Thank you, Chair. Just so it's noted, I was unable to attend the cultural event on the 27th, but my fellow people and EDI champion, Karen, was able to attend. So we were well represented with Roger and Ridian. But we continue to work through the cultural and values report we've got later. So looking at the EDI data, the cultural assessment and moving that forward. So I look forward to continuing that work. What I have done, and it's really great to hear your feedback on the cadets and the Prince's Trust, because as champion, as children and young people and the volunteers, I have met with the team as we close the academic year off. And we've taken that feedback, we've looked at lessons learned over the years, and we also started to discuss of what the next academic year looks like. And I'm really pleased to sort of say that those discussions of looking at how we can improve, strengthen and maybe grow that reach, that the good work that the children and young people do. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Roger, just going back to your points, I couldn't agree with you more. There were 40 people at that conference, you know, on EDI, which is probably the most important topic we have at the moment, which I thought was disappointing. And also I did lodge an official complaint against the outburst against Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, launched at us for all the reasons that you've said. Complete waste of time.
I think it's just unfortunate that they can say in an open forum, people can say what they like, and you have no recourse settlement in this problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, at that time it was a closed session, but I just wonder how much of that is promulgated outside. Disgraceful. Okay, but thank you. Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Fire cadet, I attended in Rushmore, which I thought was an excellent sunny evening. Prince's Trust I've got in Basingstoke tomorrow night. Work thrust over the last month, because it's only a month since we had the last full authority. I've been working on the exempt item, as you know, which is on the paper for discussion today. And governance, I think it's worth reporting that yesterday's governance meeting, the excellent, well, of course, they don't call it a report, they call it an opinion as such, but Ernst Young, who's been under the cosh from all sorts of people for not being able to produce reports and audit reports, their report puts a very good light on our activities, and I can only pay tribute to the people behind me for their contribution in that area. The internal audit report, which was examined and scrutinised at length yesterday, as well, shows us to be in excellent shape. All categories are reasonable, a couple are limited, but they can't be any more. They do highlight probably one or two areas we ought to look at, but absolutely excellent report at the moment. So we seem to be in good stead there. And as for, I did hear about your experience in London. Well, if trusted ex-employees or untrusted ex-employees are there to make their point, then that's unfortunate, and it shouldn't have been tolerated, to my mind. And that is about it at the moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any more members? Yes, George.
Thank you, Chair. The one thing I've realised in the last month is that Portsmouth City Council know very little about the Hampshire Fire Authority and the work we do. I approached some officers and some councillors in relation to bringing the outturn report forward to council so that we could note it under recommendations of officers here, which we finally managed to do, because there was a conversation of whether we could actually bring it to council, which is a really, really strange conversation to have. The monitoring officers questioning. So it didn't actually manage to make the recent full council because there was a debate on whether it could be brought to full council just for simply noting. However, it's now been decided that it has been. So the next cabinet meeting and the next full council will be publishing the report for all councillors to see, and I'll be speaking on it to obviously promote the work that we're doing.
Good, George. Thank you for keeping us on the map. Thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Nope. Okay. Moving on to item 7, which is the policy framework for fire safety on page 11 to 18. In your paperwork, I would invite Glenn Boyer to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. The purpose of this report is to seek approval from the authority for the publication of the policy framework for fire safety. The proposed policy describes how the authority will deliver fire safety to fulfil statutory requirements under fire safety law, whilst also looking forward to future service need. Having a published policy that clarifies expectations for our staff, our partners, businesses, will be helped by the authority's position. 5 core principles within the framework, which have been included in the appendices. These are lobbying and consultation. The authority take a proactive position on issues that are felt to be of most important with the greatest impact on community safety. And this is seen in areas such as the authority position on sprinklers. Moving forward, though, this policy also enables us to move into other areas such as battery storage systems. Providing information, free information to members of the public through various means. Giving advice, the legal requirement to provide advice on fire safety matters. This includes individuals and organisations. Regulation, the authority will adopt and has adopted a risk-based inspection programme to regulate compliance, with enforcement taken where improvement of fire safety has not been achieved. And then finally, prosecution, where cases meet evidential thresholds and in the public interest. Cost of potential successful prosecutions will not prevent the authority from pursuing this course of action. So the recommendations with this is that the policy is approved by the authority and the policy is published to ensure clarity of the authority's position. Thank you.
Glenn, thank you. Are we any further? As you know, Maria Miller's brought up a thing to Parliament about lithium battery storage. Are we any closer to getting any defined? Because we're not consultants, are we, in this sort of stuff? Do you want to say a word?
Just to come in, only because I've been involved in it, put it down before Glenn took over this role. So she has a private member's bill in the process for consideration, and her bill was asking for lithium ion to be included in the COMA regulations. Now, I'm going to try and struggle to remember what COMA stands for now. Control of Major Accident Hazards regulations. I had to look at my colleagues then for reassurance. So those regulations, if it were included, require the direct consultation of all local authorities, organisations like the Fire and Rescue Service and others. So in itself, I am personally very supportive, and I know we are, as an organisation, supportive of looking to further regulate or stiffen, if you like, the arrangements. Like all emerging technologies, it's very difficult to say, don't want to stand in the way of clean energy. The problem we have with lithium ion is the fact that when it does catch fire, which sadly internationally it has been, when it's been damaged, that it becomes very difficult to extinguish because of the type of reaction that occurs inside the battery. If you put water on it, you contaminate, and if you don't, then you contaminate because the smoke enters the atmosphere. So certain places which are chosen for these developments, we would argue, are not appropriate. So they're perfectly okay in some places, but when you put them next to perhaps a delicate water course or near a piece of infrastructure like hospitals or schools, then that could be more challenging for us as a fire and rescue service to be able to deal with that properly. We have the Hobson's choice of either letting it pollute the air and therefore close down hospitals or schools, or attacking it and polluting the watercourses. So either way, we are going to face challenge from the Environment Agency and others. So there is very much, we're supportive of that particular framework being hardened up. It's a question from government about what mechanism they use. It seems like we may be getting some progress in terms of actually getting some sense of becoming a statutory consultee in terms of these particular provisions, but the general planning rules still do not include us in terms of statutory consultation. But when it comes to this lithium ion, it may well be included in some amendment, some act somewhere, but it probably won't go as far as the COMA regulations.
Okay, thank you. So ongoing. Members, any questions? Roger.
On the report, on the actual Appendix A, under prosecution on the page 17, it's got FIWRA. Should that be S, not A? Because, I guess I'll ask the question because I can't remember any prosecution ever coming to the authority to approve. It is a technical situation which is the officers who make the decision and prosecute. So the other ones are FRAs, I agree, but should the prosecution be FRAS? That's my first point. The second point is in the recommendation. I think that in the 17, it should have added to it as Appendix A, and this document should have Appendix A on it.
I'll pick up that. In fact, maybe a question for Paul as well. So the appropriateness of describing the authority in that statement, because you are the enforcing authority, and you delegate certain matters to officers, but you're still the authority which prosecutes. We may process that on your behalf. This is partly why this policy is here, is because for a very long time we haven't had, not that we could find at least, an extant policy that says how would you like us to go about that. So this policy is really about filling that gap to say you are the enforcing authority. Doesn't mean, it may mean, of course, entirely up to you, doesn't mean we bring every prosecution back to you for decision. You leave that with us under delegated powers, but you could always reserve those powers if you so choose. This is the point of this policy.
Yeah, Derek?
Yeah, of interest on this lithium battery is the Hampshire County Council was not the only one, perhaps the unitaries have done it as well, about the efforts to eliminate vaping because of the single-use vaping has a very dangerous fire risk element in it, and unfortunately most of the people who are using it tend to be under 16, so we hear, so you wouldn't be prosecuting, but I believe you should include this in the work.
Fran?
There are options there to approve it or choose not to. Why would we not approve it? Is that a sensible question to ask?
Well, I can probably turn to Paul on this one, but actually we want, yes, of course, we're recommending, that's the recommendation to adopt. We would always want to give you a choice because you may say, no, it's not how we want it. So we might want more, albeit this went through an APAC process, so you could actually get the sight of what the intended policy was. but as an authority, you wouldn't want to fetter your conversations. You may say, as Councillor Price just pointed out, you might want to reserve the prosecution decisions here as an adjustment, in which case you have the option of saying, no, we'd like some more work done on this, please, in this forum. That's why we always try to give you the option rather than drive one particular recommendation. That's important to us within the law of the Fire Authority as well.
Democracy. Who? Sally. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, this is just another question about lithium batteries. I know at Southampton City Council we have been doing some work because a few months back, one of our waste lorries, there was a massive boom inside of the lorry and it had to pull over, and it made a lot of residents jump and things, and they put that down to lithium batteries not being disposed of correctly. So we're trying to do some work there. I know some of our waste team are doing some work on there. And on that note as well, I've had residents just this morning emailing with concerns that could have been what maybe triggered off the fire at the docks with these batteries not being disposed of correctly. I know I'm happy to take this up with Dave Clements, the group manager, on this, and with yourself, Neil, if I can have some bit more of an updated, because I'm being bombarded with images of the smoke, people concerned that the toxins within whatever's with the waste down there. But I know there's cabinet members are taking this up with ABP as well.
Just to add to the comments I've already made about lithium ion, so my first comments are about the large grid, the grid development. So they've got large battery facilities which have been built in certain places to hold, and one can't stand and one shouldn't stand in the way of cleaner energy, but there's something about making sure we've done that well. The battery you're describing actually is quite right and proper, because the smaller lithium ion capabilities, e-scooters, those sorts of things, cars nowadays, of course, can come with their own hazards, and it's important that the sector, including local authorities, catches up with the impact of these things. And we know that waste fires has been quite a history of being caused by careless disposal of batteries, which is why they're in a separate sort of bin. I guess if we can take any position, this policy helps us do this, is the Fire Authority can start lobbying and advising, using our machinery of contact with our communities to encourage them to be able to use the proper disposal methods and or store lithium ion carefully. There's been examples recently of tragic incidents about things like e-scooters kept under beds, being charged under beds in very crowded environments, all very dangerous things, and we did to make sure that our community realise the risks associated with them. Mostly they are safe, but when they go wrong really badly.
Members, any more questions on this paper? Glenn, anything to wrap up?
No further comments, thanks.
Okay, members, so if we can go to page 13 for the recommendation, which is that the policy for fire safety is approved by the HIWFRA full authority, that the policy for fire safety is published appropriately to ensure clarity of the authority's position.
So I think that as appendix A should be added to the first one, because you've got no document linked to the recommendation, and then appendix A should be added to the top of the document.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Katie, right? So, agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving to item 8, the Fire and Rescue Service National Culture and Values Report on page 19 to 34, and I would ask the Chief to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In Molly's absence, she's asked me to do this presentation, and as Councillor Huggins said earlier, an enormous amount of work happening in this area, and I'm grateful for the Fire Authority members, all of you actually, but certainly those who went to the LJ conference and others that are involved in this work, because your leadership is incredibly important. It's all too easy to brush cultural issues away, or indeed EDI issues away, as someone else's problem. And even, may I just say, the experiences of someone in 1988, okay, they're insulting and difficult for us to hear, but actually we should use it as a kind of positive stance to say, how do we make sure that isn't happening in today's organisation? So whilst I just like hearing it, also there was something about making sure we take the opportunity of saying, okay, let's be sure then that couldn't be happening in 2023 as it was in 88. So this report really highlights the work that we've been doing, and to some extent answers the call of HMI CFRS's National Cultural Values Report, the Spotlight Report as has been referred to. But also this report incorporates not only our own research from the HMI's findings in their last visit, but also the London Fire Brigade's cultural review they've done for themselves following their difficult headlines they've been dealing with. And I think across the sector there's a real understanding of a need to drive these issues forward. Whilst we're all very protective of our what we think is a valuable sector and what we do for our communities, clearly we're an organisation that continues to need to make sure that it is searching the dark corners of it to ensure we're not doing anything we shouldn't be doing. So the background is there was a national report, and the national report recognised there's not enough progress being made in this area, which I think we all agree. And we indeed heard in our own inspection in 2022, some of our staff reported feeling or having experiences of bullying and or discrimination within our service, and we must root those out. Whilst we recognise how difficult that is even for the HMI to share with us the exact circumstances of those matters, therefore we're taking some action to try and unearth some of those issues to make sure we can recognise it, because most of the existing facilities we have don't replicate that sense or feeling. But clearly some people feel that way, and that's why they've responded to the questionnaires in the way they have. Overall, there were 35 recommendations, some for the National Fire Chiefs Council, some for the Home Office, but 19 were for individual fire and rescue services for chief officers to pursue. And so in this paper, we've reviewed those 19 for your consideration and your understanding. And as it's mentioned here in paragraph 5, also incorporated the London Fire Brigade Cultural Review and our own inspection report. So I'll whiz through these things, but equally I'm really happy to answer questions. In fact, we've got Ben here as well, part of Molly's team, to help me answer those more difficult questions if I need to. But paragraph 6 onwards details really our progress. So within the report, these are the ones that we can demonstrate are completed. And I'll say some more about the incompleted ones in a second, about how we decided on that. But just to quickly walk through these, so there was a number of immediate effects or very, very quick action required by the HMI. The first one was about the aligning the core code of ethics, and one which I'm pleased to say we completed a little while ago, but nonetheless we were able to say that those elements of the core code of ethics are very much embedded in our values, in our behavioural set across our organisation, and our challenge, I guess, for all of our staff, all of us, is to see those demonstrated day on, day in, day out, and looking for the contraindicators that may occur so that we can deal with those as we need to. The next one was around gathering EDI data, having an approach to gathering the right data. And as you saw in our last meeting, our approach to this has changed in terms of our performance reporting to you. So you'll see much clearer EDI data now being captured across the organisation. Still more work to do with analytics about why, how, where some of these things are occurring, and where are some of our numbers are wanting. We need to focus on that some more, and more granular information is still required, but there's an approach agreed to how we gather EDI data. Next one's on developing a 360 feedback tool. And again, we've had this for some time. We've had the ability to have a 360 feedback, and that's the ability for, during PDR processes, managers to perhaps work on individual leaders or managers to say, wouldn't it be useful if you heard what others thought of your style? And that's been available for some time. We don't mandate it, but it is something which is there as a facility, amongst other development tools for our leaders and managers. And really us trying to keep a sounding on how people are perceived, including myself, of course, across the organisation, and what sort of feedback you get. Those things are important. But equally, I think, as pointed out, is preparing the individual taking the 360 for the feedback they may receive. Otherwise, asking a question you don't want the answer to can lead to bad outcomes. So that's something which we need to really make sure we're aware of in our cultural journey. But those exist. And certainly the next one is for the delivering the 360 tool for the senior team. And absolutely, we can use that tool, and some of us have. But equally, we've also taken the steps of including, in our journey as a senior team, working with a organisational development specialist to look at how relationships work across the executive and indeed the heads of service team, and also the institute directors come in and looked at our work, how we perform, how we work together, how we actually lead our way through as a senior team, and how we conduct our affairs, not only in corporate life, but in terms of leadership life also. So there's a number of things we do over and above that, but certainly that exists in our organisation. Next one is about making sure we notify the HMI of any staff misconduct, gross misconduct particularly, and we certainly do that. There's always a bit of a challenge here about what information you can legally share, but obviously we'll make sure that the HMI or indeed our SLL, who's here today, Julian, gets to hear of the things that we are grappling with in as much as they need to know. Now, Clearly, a focus on that is to make sure there's no sudden shock headlines which come out of a newspaper about something happening in an organisation which would render the HMI particularly in difficulty, or indeed us. But I would do the same with yourself as members as I would with the HMI, to make sure there are no shocks. You don't read something in the paper and discover it for the first time, and that's really important in terms of that relationship. The next one is make sure that we review our current background checks. So this is about our criminal checks, DBS checks. So for some time now, we've done basic checks ranging from basic checks all the way through to enhanced checks, depending on your role. We did this some time ago. So we're confident that our approach within our policy lays out the reasons why some staff get enhanced checks, because they're dealing with more vulnerable people or may have lone contact, right through to how some areas that have basic checks because of this employed by the Fire and Rescue Service. So we're very confident that we're on track with that. However, new legislation has just been passed. A number of us have been driving this, including the National Fire Chiefs Council, my own area of National Fire Chiefs Council, to try and get standard checks for all Fire and Rescue Service staff, and that's just been approved and gone through the House of Lords and is now in law. So we'll put a lot of effort in now to make sure we come up to standard with that. As across the country, we're doing the same thing. Huge amounts of guidance materials have been produced, because that is actually about safeguarding and protecting our community and other staff. So that's a really, really important part of us. The process of doing that obviously comes with its own challenges, but we'll treat staff fairly and an open way to make sure they recognise what we're trying to do while we're trying to do it. So they're very much on track there. Next one, by 1st of June, chief officers should make sure they provide accessible information for all staff and members of the public on how they can raise concerns. So we use an external company internally for our staff, so there's a confidential reporting line that people can use. In the last 12 months, we've had 21 reports from our staff in that way, so we know it's being used, which is both good and bad, of course, because if staff feel they need to report something that's happened to them which is unsatisfactory or worrying for them, that itself is bad, but the fact that they feel able to report it is good. So we want to make sure, it's a bit like the health and safety, the kind of near misses reporting is a good thing. We want people to report it and have a habit of reporting it. So we're very keen that people continue to use that mechanism. And also for external people, we have our own website process that people do use to report their concerns on the things they see happening in the service, whether it be partners, members of the public or others. So we're confident that process exists. And also the next one is about supporting those that have raised concerns. So in other words, if you raise a concern, you should be protected and you should be looked after, much like the whistleblowing procedure, which has always been extant in this organisation. If you are someone that comes forward, we will make sure that your confidence is protected, and you've done that confidentially. So our process of reporting is very much making sure that only a few people, in fact 2 people in an organisation know about it, Molly and the Deputy Chief, and they will know what the allegations are, but the details have been sifted out by this third-party independent company. When it comes to others internally, we have a SRO, a senior responsible officer, that may be doing the investigation, and their job is to make sure those who have allegations made against them are protected, but importantly also people who have made the allegations are also protected. So that sort of the distinct need to protect all of our staff is really important in our processes. So moving to page 24, last one on the top there, this is about whistleblowing in general. We've had a whistleblowing policy in place for some time. It's an extension of, if you like, the internal reporting mechanism, and normally revolves around things like fraud or inappropriate use of finances, all those sorts of things. And but nonetheless, that exists, and the monitoring officer provides the contact for that process. I have to say, if we get something through our internal mechanism which would lend itself to whistleblowing, that's something we may refer on to the monitoring officer anyway, to make sure that the lawful process, your lawful process of using the monitoring officer for that checking is carried out. Item 7, or paragraph 7, page 24, deals with the partially complete recommendations. Now, again, I think looking back through this report, I think we've been fairly harsh on ourselves, but I prefer that actually when it comes to partially completed, because you'll note one of these dates at least has gone by. But I would say, I think probably after this meeting, and I'll explain why, I think some of those will go into the that's been done category rather than partially completed. So the first one here, and I'll read this recommendation, the first part in full. By 1st of August 2023, which is coming up fast, Chief Fire Officers should develop plans to promote progression paths. Now, I worry about any objective which says should develop plans, because that could just say, I've got a plan, and therefore that's complete. That doesn't mean anything's done, or it may never happen for the next 10 years. But I'm really keen that we make sure we've got a plan that we're all confident can deliver and make a difference. And that's why this is in the partially complete area. So yes, we have a plan, we have a policy, we have an approach to our pathways, and the team are developing it further to finesse following staff feedback. So the challenge here is to make sure that our staff feel that inequalities are built out or been taken out of our processes, not that we feel it. And that's the difference between this being complete or otherwise. So we'll take our time to make sure our staff feel that our current approach does take away those inequalities of opportunity, and we'll make sure once that's done, we'll then be able to say that's perfectly complete. We do approach in this area the broadest selection of candidates, and they're always operational. We have our own track record here of attracting people from outside the normal kind of operational route, and as it's described in the paper, we've had a recent appointment to Head of Community Safety who traditionally that post would have been uniformed, but because of the process we've taken to advertise that, it's been obvious to all those who have seen it that you don't have to be an operational officer to get that job, and that currently is filled by a non-operational manager. And we've done the same in the past for assistant director jobs, even director jobs as well. So it is very clear to us that it can't always be about uniform people and operational needs. There is a role for operational responsibilities, but not in every single role. Next one is about EDI objectives, it really specifies the succession plans, how we intend to improve our diversity across the service. So you've set your own EDI objectives for us, and that's something we've got as our primary leadership part. But also our behaviours and processes, this could be argued to be complete, but equally I would want to see more progress in this area before I sign it off, because it is by 1st of June. So I can say we do have plans, we do have mechanisms, we have some track record of showing diversity. Our own senior team, our own heads of service is a great example of that, about attracting new people I've just been describing across organisation. We're also looking closely at the direct entry to station manager level. There's a fair bit of controversy about this across England, about the direct entry at station manager level. We are closely linked to the National Fire Chiefs Council and those services that are piloting it, and we're watching very closely. So at this time, we are not bringing that in, the direct entry at that level, mainly because of the work we are putting into other areas, but we certainly don't dismiss it as a really useful way of encouraging and growing diversity all through our organisation. Because one of the shortages we have is probably uniformed operational middle management. And it's something that could be an answer to that problem. But we are watching the pilot services first to make sure the lessons are learnt there, and we'll certainly be hot on their heels and learning the lessons from them in the near future. Bottom of page 25 says it's about our leadership and development of our people to be much more inclusive. And certainly we use an array of, we're pending the arrival of the College of Fire, but we use an array of leadership opportunities for people. And across our plethora of leadership, we make sure that they get the widest opportunity, right through from the standard management development procedures through to leadership development from the National Leadership Centre, or School of Governance it's called nowadays, from the LGA, which you've all been using in the past, and various others. So our focus now is on supervisory managers, because we recognise that there's a fair number of occasions when things could have been nipped in the bud, and our supervisors, if they're better trained, better understanding, they can be much quicker on those issues and make sure we encourage better conversations early on to stop things progressing into what turn out to be quite difficult issues for people all round. So there's a number of things we are doing there, and as I say, that will be coming through in the fullness of time, and we are waiting for some of that feedback. Next one is October 23. Chief officers should have put in place monitoring, including through the gathering analysis of staff feedback. So very much we are seeing a lot of questionnaires coming through, not only from the HMI, but from other areas, also the NFCC. We are launching our own staff survey, our cultural survey. In fact, we're in procurement processes as we speak, and that is to focus on some of the things I mentioned earlier about not knowing exactly where some of these challenges are coming from, the experiences people are actually having, where and how. This survey is really focused on our staff, and we're looking at the differences across our staff. Because whilst we are one big team when it comes to delivering our service to the community, there are clearly micro cultures that exist in our organisation. We want to get underneath them to understand which of those are positive, which of those bring negative outcomes for our people who work in them. So our cultural survey will be launched shortly, and that really will answer some of the questions in terms of our certainty about whether some of the things we've done are effective, or whether still more needs to happen to them to make things improve. Next one down, the chief officers have plans in place to ensure they meet the Fire Standards Board standard. yep, we have a plan, we have a mechanism for making sure that every single standard which is published comes into the service, is assessed for the gaps, and then there's a plan put together to meet that standard over the shortest period of time possible. There are a number of standards across the standards board, and so we're working them all. So I'm confident that we have, that is now complete, but again, we want to make sure that the standard for this particular issue will be borne out by some of the feedback we'll get out of the survey. So the standard may be being adopted, but are people experiencing the benefits of that? That's quite important. And the bottom one there about seeking regular feedback asks us to seek regular feedback. Again, we have a very clear mechanism in terms of our culture, ethics and behaviour group, in terms of what are they're hearing. That's made up of people from across the organisation. They are kind of a feedback mechanism for our feelings out in the organisation, what's happening in terms of diversity, culture, values. We also have a network groups, and every single member of the senior team receives reverse mentoring from those groups. It gives us a real good insight into how well we're doing, but also how well the service is operating against their needs. Which of these are barriers? Which ones are we seeing? Which ones have we not spotted yet or not actioned yet? So I'm comfortable with the other things you've seen on this report, that we are doing all we can in terms of getting regular feedback, but also things like the internal mechanism for reporting concerns all give us insight to say how well are we actually doing. Your own contact with our staff as members is vital to us too, about your understanding about how well we're doing, what are people's actual experiences. Because we can have lots of policies, lots of process, lots of training, lots of great people, but unless the experiences of all of our staff is positive, then we're not doing our job well enough. And that's some of the challenges we've got, particularly around EDI. I've given up a long time ago trying to make everyone happy, but I recognise the need to make sure we do what we can to remove barriers, to give them every chance of surviving and thriving in this organisation in a positive way. Bottom of page 27. So this is about, we provide assurances to HMICFRS that all parties are supported in relation to ongoing investigations. That's extant current investigations, and this process really is making sure that, one, you're comfortable with what you're seeing here, because I wanted to report to you first, and then we'll make sure we go back and say, yes, we're comfortable that everyone currently going through a process, one, the process is sound, but two, the individuals involved in it have got the support they require, and we can then report back to say that that's the case. And over the page, bottom of page 28, should assure us, Chief Officer should assure themselves that updates and how concerns are being handled are shared with those who have raised them. So it goes back to the support of those who have raised them. As you can imagine, this can be quite delicate. Certainly those using an external company dealing with internal complaints, sometimes they want to remain anonymous, and that's absolutely fine, but it makes it very difficult to handle those complaints directly. When you've got a tip-off that something's happening, all you can do is start to try to understand the cultures leading to that action. But where people are coming forward and saying, I would like to make a complaint about someone, something, some behaviour, then our job is to make sure we protect both sides, and we have a process of natural justice to make sure that process is followed. And indeed, we're going to see very shortly a spotlight review done across 10 services across England for the HMI to look at how misconduct hearings or processes are followed. And I'm not sure we're part of that yet or not, I don't know, but that's something we're expecting to see also. So we'll look to learn from that particular survey and that particular inspection from the HMI to see what the very best practice looks like. But I feel we do a very great job in trying to protect those who complain as well as those who are perhaps the subject of the complaint, to make sure that natural justice is followed. In there's a direct recommendation for a professional standards function. At this stage, we don't believe that we have a need for a professional standards function because it talks about this external professional standards function. But I will talk more about right at the end about how we are changing our structures to make sure we've got a better chance of serving our staff well. Over the page then on paragraph 8, you'll see that these are not started, and hopefully it makes sense why they're not started yet, because there's no standard yet to comply to. So as soon as that is published, we'll action that in our normal process for dealing with standards. But I'm fairly confident, seeing the standard development, that we'll be very much in line with those things. There'll be no surprises for us there. Paragraph 9, further work. I mentioned earlier about the work we're doing looking at the wider issues. We know some of our staff have said they've experienced bullying and discrimination, so we want to look more closely at it, and our own survey will help us draw that out in terms of and also the internal reporting mechanism help draw this out as well. So we'll understand that better, and obviously we're working closely with London Fire Brigade to understand their journey. So page 30 details our the things I haven't mentioned yet, detail the actions we're taking within our own cultural plan, and I'm delighted that this work has been done. Some really good stuff happening here. I won't go through all these in detail, but you'll get the feeling. Top, there's a cultural dashboard being developed by December. Further training to really get to the bottom of bullying and harassment, particularly because we know that staff have said to the HMI, I've suffered this. I know Kent Fire and Rescue Service did this. Letting our people understand really what bullying and harassment is. That means that they know the definition of it. Because just because you didn't get something you really, really wanted doesn't mean you've been bullied. But equally, when you've suffered bullying, we need to make sure we act. We must sort the wheat from the chaff, if I can use that expression, to make sure we really focus on those that do need help. And we've got behaviours that do need adjusting, as opposed to people just feel a bit disgruntled because things haven't gone their way. And they want to lash out in some way. So I'm not saying everything that has been reported is like that, because sadly there will be some experiences, I'm sure, where people have suffered, and we need to make sure we deal with that well. There'll be a management charter to help managers really understand what their role is in this, so we can make sure that they have a clear role in not bystanding, in taking action and helping those people who feel that they've been treated poorly, and be part of the journey which helps people be treated better. Inclusion and wellbeing. Making the link between inclusion and actual well-being, because we know people who don't feel included have poor outcomes in terms of their health and well-being, and we need to make sure we make that link, because our staff, we know, are very focused on well-being, and we want that to continue, and we can link that back to inclusion. That will help us drive that also. And that's also included in the PDR, it says next, in terms of helping people understand it's important to us as it should be important to them. The last one there is about, I said earlier, about high quality analytics, is making sure our analytics get better, more granular, we can understand some of the issues. Because at the moment, and give all due to the HMI, they report back on things they've seen in their surveys. We have little response to that other than, it seems that some people may be suffering bullying harassment. We want to have more analytics so we can be really clear about spaces, places, and what's actually happening in an organisation without exposing people to personal scrutiny. And that's really, really important, that balance. So lastly, last part I want to cover really is the paragraph 12 onwards. I mentioned earlier about structures. So currently we've had over a number of years now, since shared service came into being, and there's many positive things about shared service with our colleagues at the County Council. One of the things we have recognised is we took a lot of cost out of the system many years ago when austerity began. And some of the things we've noticed now with the HMI's feedback and our staff's feedback is because the offer we get from the centre, the HR function, is very professional, very good, but it isn't one-to-one, and it isn't bespoke to the certain context of a particular fire station, a particular workplace. And we know that our organisation, being an organisation that is so distributed, has very different cultures across our organisation in different places. So we need an HR function that can service that well. And so what we're doing now, we're working with, and there'll be a further paper for members to consider, working with our colleagues in Hampshire County Council and the shared service to work out how we then provide a much more bespoke and fitting service for our staff, which will give managers more direct support individually, which is bespoke to their own circumstances, and also our staff that are perhaps not having the greatest experience in terms of grievance and other things to process those things well. So I'm confident that our managers will be better supported with better training, but also better HR support, which is much more bespoke to their needs, as opposed to a broader professional but vanilla service we currently get. So that paper will follow in the weeks ahead, which you'll see those changes. This sort of teases it up in a way. So in conclusion, I'm confident that we are making progress. I'm confident all the deadlines the HMI have set for us that we've hit, so we're not behind in that regard, but I'm also confident that we're working hard to make sure that whatever we do is not just ticking a box, it's actually making a substantive change to our staff's experiences in our organisation. So that's why I take the challenges of what happened in 1988 very seriously still, because we do not want to be happening in 2023. It'd be unforgivable for someone to have the same experiences now they were all those years ago. Even 5 years ago, I would not like someone having those experiences there. And I hope when the inspectorate come back next year, they have a very different experience when talking to our staff about the things they are seeing. There will always be some historical experiences people want to talk about, and understandably so if they're hurting still. We'll look to get those people to talk to us about their experiences. We'll look to expunge those concerns so we know that they're being dealt with and they can't happen to anyone again. Often people want to talk about it because they don't want it to happen to anybody else, and that's really important we deal with that. So hopefully this report gives you the assurance that we are making good progress against those recommendations, but equally we are aware of our own situation in terms of our knowledge of ourselves, our knowledge of our staff and their conduct. We are a great organisation, great fire and rescue service. Our community think very highly of us, and it is our job to make sure we can challenge those that challenge us to be better and better still for the future. Thanks, Chairman. Happy to take questions.
Grief. You probably want to go lie down, don't you?
Yeah, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. That was very, very comprehensive. Excellent. Members? Roger.
Chairman, I don't know how you're going to deal with this report, but can I suggest, can we take it page by page? Because there might be questions on each of those different sections, and it'd be easier if we go through page by page rather than taking questions which might go backwards and forwards all over the report.
For you, Roger. Good idea. Karen?
I think it's an excellent piece of work. I have two questions really, but you answered one because I've done positive bystander training, so I think that's really helpful for people to be able to deal with things there and then. So I gather you're doing that because you mentioned it. But I was just wondering what happens in the selection process. Is there a real emphasis on culture and what is expected?
Process in relation. I'm sorry, my mic on. So the selection process in relation to selecting from initial entrance into the organisation. Yeah, so we build into that what we call strength-based interviews that looks at individual strengths in relation to our cultural areas that we have in. So we've got a number of questions that we ask people in relation to their experiences and what they can bring to our organisation to improve our culture, not only to kind of understand the things that we're missing also, but so they can enrich our organisation with their things. So we do bring that into our interview process, and not only at the kind of process of bringing people into our organisation, but then at every level within our development and progression processes, we incorporate those kind of questions into that as well.
Derek.
Yeah, just an overview of it. I don't know about going through 34 pages and of items, Roger, but just as an overview, core values. Not once in the 30 pages does it mention words such as pride, opportunity. It deals fantastically with well-being and operational issues, but the actual core value, the pride, the thing that hit me when I came on the authority a few years ago was quite simply everybody in the management is very proud of being part of Hampshire Isle of Wight fire rescues. I think that is a core value, the pride, I really do. And opportunity is a word which links with the one that Karen's just mentioned. In terms of selection of the right quality people. But as I say, I would like I thought it came up on, Molly did a dummy PowerPoint presentation on some of the items that were, and again, I thought of it at that time, but I do think that core value is very much the pride and opportunity that's offered in the fire and rescue service. And again, that does stretch over to how it's perceived in the community who fund it. Sorry? Oh, sorry, John.
There you go. Thank you. I think your reference to core values is important. We have, as you know, a set of values which we're agreed. And interesting, a lot of this, the issues around EDI culture really play into them. The difficulty is some of these words can be oversimplistic for some. So our values, showing respect, supporting others, everyone playing their part and reaching further, showing respect clearly, recognising differences, all those things are in there. But for some, showing respect may be translated quite differently. So some of this work is as I was saying earlier about bystanders, is saying, no, do you know, that's not okay. What you've just done there is not okay. And because I'm sure it's causing distress to this person, but it's causing distress to me. And that's where we need the earliest conversation anywhere, even here, and on our fire stations or on our workplaces, for people to be able to speak up and say, hang on a second, I'm not sure that's okay. Not in a kind of PC way or anything like that, but just making it okay for people to feel safe to say, I'm not sure that is the way we want to produce that. That's what we meant by showing respect in our values. But obviously, sometimes you've got to produce some sort of behavioural indicators for people to understand exactly what we mean. And this is where managers have got a key role, their charter, to say, your job is actually to intervene and to say, hang on a second, that's not right. So you're right to point out the values. You do feel these values in this place, I think. It's probably easier for me to miss them now. I've been here long enough. But for the likes of yourself as members, when you visit our workplaces, I'd really encourage you to look for those positive values. Equally, look when you think it hasn't happened, and let us know when that's occurring. Without feeling you are telling tales, please do let us know where you spot things which don't seem to accord with these values and indeed the promise within this paper.
Okay, Fran, please.
On page 25, it says you've worked with staff networks to identify barriers for entry for underrepresented groups. I just wondered, what are some of the barriers you've already identified through those networks?
I'll ask Ben to come in a second, but essentially, I mean, in fact, just on Sunday at the Mellor in Eastleigh, one of the things we recognise is sometimes the assumptions that we can make what the barriers exist in our organisation, and the values of supporting others, and the idea of how do we support a community we don't understand or I'm not part of, let's say. And it's very easy to think of some groups in our communities, in society as communities, and sometimes we make the mistake of perhaps referring to some of our minority ethnic people in our communities as a community in its own right, and often they're not at all. So it's even that language and thinking about how do we access this is part of the consultation we're going through now with the as mentioned earlier by the chairman, is getting various different groups in our community to say, tell us about your life, tell us what you see as the risks. So it's not only about protecting them as a service, but also how do we make our organisation attractive for you to want to work in. And sometimes we've discovered that just by positioning our offer as firefighters, that in itself is wrong, because there's some incredibly talented, perhaps ICT specialists or people who work in estates or engineers that would love working for an organisation like this, but because we positioned our offer as firefighters, we want more diverse firefighters. We're missing a trick, and that's something we've had feedback on already in terms of valuing people's differences. They may not want to be firefighters, never wants to be a firefighter, but our over-focus on that end of the business, which is important, but it's still something we've recognised that we're perhaps getting wrong occasionally when we're doing our recruitment drives. Because you're a big red fire engine, join the fire service, but actually it's not all about the big red fire engine. It's everything behind the scenes that support that big red fire engine that we've recognised. So as an example, perhaps, of things we've discovered in conversations with our teams out there, and it was certainly come up Sunday in the Mellor, that sort of approach. And we are, trying to understand more about what the barriers are to joining our organisation.
I'll be quite interested to actually hear what those barriers are from the mouths of the people who tell you. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. A couple that we do know about, we're working very hard to try and overcome for some groups within the community, specifically around firefighter recruitment, the fitness becomes an issue. So we have in the past worked very hard to support people prior to recruitment campaigns to help them to understand what the requirements are well in advance, so they can work with us and we can work with them to prepare them to kind of overcome some of those barriers. So, as the Chief has said, getting into the communities to identify what the barriers are then allows us time to take some positive action to really support individuals to overcome those barriers well in advance of us driving a recruitment campaign, and gets them interested in the service, so we can really kind of support them out in the communities rather than just hoping they turn up.
Zoe.
Thank you. Just firstly to add to that, as Champion for People in EDI, what we would hope to do, Fran, is to work with Molly and her team to further scrutinise some of that data and that granular detail that's needed, and then make the appropriate decision of whether or not to bring it back to APAG or to board, and to give you those details to discuss and look at those themes. So that's what I would hope. As a champion, we are there to sort of scrutinise, to champion, and as an expert within that that build. So we would definitely support that to bring it back to wider members. I just want to say, as sort of working along Molly and her team, and I think it goes to show, Neil, with the fully comprehensive briefing and overview that you just gave there, that there's a lot of work that's happened in this space. And I think it's quite right to split it up into completed, partial, and those that we're looking forward, because it is about those progressive steps. We only know what we know at that moment in time, and it is about safely doing that and processes that are fit for purpose. So whether or not that's setting up a 360 PDR process, you know, and getting EDI data, but the next steps in that then is obviously the competency is now looking at the mindset, or whether or not it's the belonging and the values, and that would come within that cultural assessment that we're taking forward. And it's quite right that we take those steps through that. I think, you know, just a couple of things that I've noted. I went to the relaunch of the staff network and your 4 themes. That was really well represented and attended, and I look forward to attending those groups moving forward. And I will say, and it's not mentioned, that does include volunteers, and that was really well represented when we had the first volunteer awards evening, and that came through. And I think maybe that needs to be in the narrative, that it does include volunteers as well. I think moving forward, I look forward to the work we're doing in the cultural space and the cultural assessment. I will think that will move how we use our data and evolve that data, and maybe using some of the language that Derek, you suggest regarding those core values, because I think it will take some of that forward. What we also don't mention, and I'm very passionate about this, as members here as board, we are also talking about ourselves when we talk about those core web values, ethics and that culture, and I'll be working with Molly and Rebecca to have a look at what that looks like within our members' training and development as well. Thank you.
Roger, I'm not terribly keen on ploughing through the whole report.
I'm going to pick out the ones I want to know, because it's obviously people don't want to go that way, and people have picked different ones out. Going to page 23, at the top of the page, it talks about there's been 21 reports received from staff through the system. And what I would like to know is a flavour of what those 21 reports are. I don't want to know the detail. I don't want to know who it is, but I want to get a flavour. It may be that you don't want to say what that is here, but I think we should know, because if all 21 were of a certain type of bullying, we have a bullying problem, and we as the authority needs to know that and be able to looking at it with the officers. I suspect it's not. I suspect it's a combination of lots of different things, but I think rather than just putting 21 in a report, we need to have a flavour of it. So that's my first question, so we understand what's going on.
Okay, good point. Do you want to respond to that?
I will. Yeah, more than happily in ask Molly in a closed session just to talk you through the kind of themes. I think that makes sense and is appropriate. I can assure you that they aren't for bullying. They aren't such a strong theme as that. But the reason the number's in there is perhaps demonstrate to you that it's being used, it's known about, and it's being used, and that's really, really helpful. I said earlier, most people don't want to share their identities in that process, but happily talk you through that, and you can recognise, and also tell you what we're doing about what we've heard as well.
Okay, Roger. Next.
If I may. So, don't worry, I'm not turning into a politician with that phrase. The word positive action is very clearly defined in EDI world, as much as taking action to offset the discrimination that others may feel. I'm not sure that's the legal definition, but that's one I'll have a go at. But the idea of being able to take action where you are offering an opportunity for those who perhaps haven't been included in the past. So the example was used by Ben in terms of positive action was one focusing on, let's say, underrepresented groups like women in our organisation, focusing on them to say that think about a job in the fire service. So it's not positive discrimination, that's quite different. Positive action is taking positive steps towards making sure that that underrepresented group gets a better chance of applying for the job in the first place. Not becoming a firefighter, that's a process you run for selection, but applying for it in the first place. You're trying to rebalance the application rates for certain groups which are underrepresented. So the positive action is not just a throwaway comment about let's do something positive. It's positive action means you take away the barriers, or you focus on the barriers, which as we described earlier, we're still trying to identify more barriers, the ones we haven't seen yet. We know that women weren't getting in through the selection process because they weren't fit enough at one stage, and that's why we took the action to say move the fitness information earlier so they get a chance of rebalance. That's positive action in its essence.
And
Next.
next one is on page 26, again at the top, again about the Fire Authority members. It says our Fire Authority members have induction and development days throughout the year. Yes, we do. But I think you've missed a point here that we also are encouraged by the service to go to the LGA Training College in Warwick, and we're encouraged to go on any outside or body to get training. I do believe that some authorities, or some services I should say, don't encourage their members. The service here does encourage all of us to take positive steps outside of the system, and I think that would be better to be added in there.
Yeah, and thank you, because it's great that such a beautifully formed fire authority. A third of our fire authority members were at the recent seminar, so which nobody else could say. So I think it's a really good point to add to the minute, I think.
Members, any more questions on this paper? Okay, if I can draw your attention then to the recommendations on page 34, which is that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority note the progress and breadth of work to improve the cultural health of our organisation. Agreed? Noted? Noted? Chief, thank you. That was extremely good. No, great. Okay, so item 9, which is exclusion of the press and public. We are now closing the meeting to the public, as the following reports are of a confidential nature and there is a requirement not to disclose information in the following reports. So this part of the meeting closes at 11:52.